Welcome to Liesel's Artistic Studio. Today I'm going to teach you how you can paint these beautiful and realistic looking poppies with watercolors. So let's get started, and don't forget to like and subscribe. For supplies today, we need watercolor paper. Now last week I showed you step by step how to draw these poppies, so if you missed that tutorial or if you're new to my channel, make sure you go back and watch that. You can find it by clicking the link above or at the end of this tutorial. My paper is cut to the size of 8 by 10 so I can easily frame and hang it when I'm done, but you can do whatever size you'd like. I also have a Watercolor Round Brush. This is a size 6, but any similar size brush will work just fine. Just make sure it has a nice fine point at the tip. I also have water, a paper towel, and of course watercolor paints. For my colors today, I have Paynes Gray, sap green mixed with some azo yellow for a yellow green, cadmium red mixed with cadmium orange for a nice red orange, and cadmium orange. Now keep in mind these are colors that I'm using, but you are the artist here and you can choose or use any colors you want or already have on hand. Also, as a quick side note, you can find all of the information about any of my supplies, paint brands and name colors, brush brands and sizes, where to purchase them, etc. in the description of this video if you're interested. All right, now that all that technical stuff is out of the way, it's time for the fun part, painting. So we are going to start by painting the petals of these flowers, first by using the wet on wet technique, which means we will first paint a section with water before we start adding the color. That way the colors will easily spread and blend in a soft and gentle way. So for this top section of the flower that has been painted with water, we are then going to take some cad orange and paint some of the top and indented areas for the lighter spots on the petal. Now take some of the red orange and fill in the gaps between the light orange. And it's okay if they start to blend together slightly. In fact, that's exactly what we want. Now, here's an important tip. We are basically painting each section of this painting today, moving from light colors to dark colors. So next, take some cad red and add that to a few spots you feel need darkened or a little bit of a shadow. Now while that first petal dries, pick another petal to paint that is not touching the petal you just painted too much, or the colors might start to blend that you don't want to blend together. Then paint that petal using a similar method as the first. Also, if you feel you need some areas even more dark, then you can add in just a touch of black, but I would recommend not using too much or it can take the vibrance out of the bright colors and make it look a little muddy. There's not really a right or wrong here with how you choose to paint this. The good thing about this painting is that you are really just focusing on one little section at a time. The biggest tip I can give to you for the petals on this painting is that of values. What I mean by this is that if you have a petal or a section of a petal that is fairly light in value, you're going to want the petal next to it or touching it to be darker in value, and vice versa. In that way, each section will stand out and look separated from the surrounding petals instead of having it all blend into one large blob of color. In other words, just try to do your best in making each petal individualized and slightly different from the petals right next to it. Now with that being said, I'm going to try to paint these next few petals darker than the previous petals. So this time I'm going to skip using the light orange altogether and make my lightest color on the petal the red orange. Then I'll use the Cad red to fill in the gaps and some black or Paynes gray to really darken up the inside shadow area. While those darker petals dry, I'm going to move to the small front petal. For this one, to make it a little different in value than the petals next to it, I'll use the light Cad orange for the top and sides and add some red and maybe just a hint of black on the bottom edge. When all the petals I recently painted are dry, I'm going to move to the last inside petals using the same painting methods as before. As a quick side note, if you ever get too much color or it's too dark, rinse and wipe your brush off, then use your brush and soak up some of that excess color. After all the petals are painted and dry, let's finish off the center part of this flower. We're going to start by painting a little buffer area with some red orange right here on this upper section. Then we'll take some yellow-green and paint in the very center. Lastly, while all of this paint is still wet, carefully dab in some Paynes gray into any of the unpainted areas and let the colors blend together slightly. Now we'll paint the second poppy. This one does not have the center area showing and also doesn't have as many petals, but it will be painted in basically the same way as the first. I'm going to try to have the back petals a slightly lighter value than the front petals, and I will also make my darkest areas right here at the base of the flower. For the finishing touch on these poppies, let's paint in the stamen. Make sure your poppies are completely dry. Then use the Paynes gray and carefully, with just the tip of your brush, make some thin lines at the center. Then after the lines are painted, add some little dots of color on the tops of some of those lines. And here's a tip on how to get some nice thin lines. After you dip your brush in the paint, gently touch the tip of the brush on a paper towel to take off any of the excess paint and water. Then, when you paint the lines, use quick, light movements and make sure that only the tip of the brush is touching the paper. It also helps to start your lines from the bottom and move upward. Now really quick, before I paint the greenery, I'm going to add in a few small splatters, but this is totally optional. I'm going to just do a few red splatters near the poppy tops, and then a few green splatters near the stems and leaves. It's finally time for the last piece of our painting, the stems, leaves, and buds. For the stems, I'm going to paint the entire stem using the yellow-green. Then while it is still wet, I'll take the sap green and apply it at the top of the stem, right under the head of the poppy, and blend the paint downwards, fading it out at about halfway down the stem. This will give it the look of shadow and dimension. Then for the leaves, I'll use a similar method where I paint the top half of the leaf with the yellow-green and the bottom half with the sap green. Then let them blend together in the middle. When you're ready to paint the buds, you will basically be painting them in the same way as you did the stems, with the yellow-green first, and then adding some dark green while it's still wet. But this time, the dark green will not only spread partway down the stem, but partway on the bud itself. I am mostly pushing the dark color on the edges of the bud, and especially the underside of the bud for the shadow. Now for a fun finishing touch to this painting, you can add the little fuzzy hairs that poppies have along the stem and buds. These will be painted with the sap green. They will be thin, short, and small. Also, be careful not to overdo this. A little of these go a long way and they still give the same effect. I am also only painting the fuzz about 1/3 of the way down the stem. For the final touch to this painting, you can also add a few vein lines to the leaves and buds. And here is your beautiful, realistic looking poppy flowers. I hope you had some fun today and maybe even learned something new. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please consider subscribing to my channel so I can continue to help you discover your artistic side.